Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe. Hey, well, welcome to the show, Erik.
Hey, man. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time to talk to me and share your story kind of with the audience. So to start, can you give us an idea of your journey? So starting at about 18 years old, like did you go to college? Did you not? And then how did you kind of get started in business along the way?
So my parents had a construction company growing up, and I was like digging post holes and pounding fence posts in the ground, and I hated it. So I was a senior in high school, did all this hard labor and thought, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I should probably go to college. So then I went to Montana State University because it was like 8 hours from where I live. They had great fly fishing, skiing, camping, rock climbing, mountain biking, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's where I started my college. And then I eventually graduated with a degree in business administration. And then I was living in Europe for a while, then went to go to law school in Virginia Beach, actually Chesapeake.
Okay.
And I was ready to go. And then I started to look at like what they made, how much money they made, how many hours they worked, how long it took to really get to the point where you're, doing well, making really good money. And I'm like, I was a C student. So like law school would have been hard, and being an attorney would have been harder. And I just didn't enjoy it. I wouldn't have enjoyed it. So I bought a truck, bought a lawnmower, a rake and a shovel. And I started putting out door hangers and got some jobs. And this is where my franchising journey really starts. So I was working for a lady and planting some flowers for her. She came out with a glass of water and said, here you go, Erik, here's some water. And we just started talking. And she said, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a real estate investor. And she said, oh, we did that 20 years ago. We bought a condo down by the beach in Virginia Beach. And we don't want it anymore. Like, we want to sell it, but our real estate agent makes money every month by leasing it for us. And so, me, dumb and young, wouldn't, just like saw opportunity. I said, how much do you want for it? I had no money at the time. Okay. And she said, nothing. We want somebody to take over our payments because we just want out of it. I'm like, well, let me look at your mortgage statement. And it was an assumable mortgage, which means she paid for it for 20 years and paid it down, bought it 20 years ago. It appreciated, and she just wanted someone to pay the closing costs. And so I went to my parents and I said, hey, do you want to partner with me on this 50-50? Like, you pay all the closing costs, you're 50-50 partners, and I'll pay you back 50% of the closing costs when I get some money. And they're like, it's too good to be true. And my real estate broker at the time said, I don't know how Erik found this, but if you don't do it, I'll do it with him. And so we ended up partnering on that deal, and the lady and her husband were happy, and we were happy. And I eventually got bought out of that from my parents, and I used that as my seed money to buy my first franchise. And that was more money than I made in like a month or two than I'd made in my entire life up to that point. And that's when I realized like the power of leverage, the power of connections, the power of just asking the right questions, and so many things. But I bought my first franchise called Liberty Tax with the proceeds from that sale.
Okay. So how much did you make on it?
It was about 20 grand.
Okay. And this was and why did she want out again?
This was about 20 years ago.
Why did she just didn't want it anymore? Didn't want the headache?
No, they had the tenant was a pain.
Okay.
They had a tenant that was a pain. Like, my first month, I had to go over there and like take a toy truck out of the toilet,
Okay. So you're taking their headache. Like, it was just like they were set. They just didn't need this headache.
Yeah.
Just wanted out. And it's like the opportunity, right? You never know. It's just solving other people's problems. Like,
it is.
And she said,
and I wanted to make sure I wasn't taking advantage of anybody, because I wouldn't do that. And she said, Erik, you just seem like a really nice young man, and we want to do this. So I took a Carlton Sheets course. Like he was a big real estate guy back in the day. And so I had an option contract, and I got either $100 bill or a $100 check for my option. And she signed the option agreement, and that locked it in. We had to close within 30 days. And I still have that agreement because it's just like such a pivotal point in my journey.
So you got this cash and you decide, hey, I'm going to get into business myself. So, why did you pick Liberty Tax?
Because I had some friends, they were based in Virginia Beach. The franchisor was based in Virginia Beach. I had some friends that were looking at it and friends that worked there in the franchise sales department. And so I went and I looked at, I put in my information like, hey, I'm interested. And, they're like, oh, here's a young guy. And there's a bunch of other young people that were buying the brand at the time. And I went to what I thought was like a discovery day or just a corporate meeting, but it was their annual convention.
Okay.
And so everyone was happy, and it just seemed like a good culture and a fun place to be. And so there were other younger people. I was in my, mid 20s, early 20s, mid 20s at the time. And there were other people like me that were buying. So I'm like, yeah, this is a group. This is a good group to get involved with. And we were opening up and John Hewitt there had Jackson Hewitt. And so I'm like, here's a guy that has a track record in franchising, and the business of taxes just seems stable. And their big thing was work on your business, not in your business. And they had Michael Gerber speak at the first conference that I went to. So I thought that all started to align with how I wanted to do it. I'm like, I'm not going to get stuck doing taxes because I hate taxes. I don't know how to do them, and I'm never going to do it. But I was a marketing guy, and that's what they wanted. So that's why I did it.
So you opened up your first one, and then what'd that look like? How, did you grow it to multiple locations? How long were you in it?
Yeah. So that first one was in Kansas City, Missouri. They have an area developer program. So like people go in and buy a region, and my friend Kelly bought the Kansas City region with his friend Trey. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go there. Cause I asked John, like, where should we go? He's like, Kansas City. Kansas City is a great market, home of H&R Block. Let's go compete with them. And there's like 15 or 20 of us that opened up overnight that tax season. Like there was nobody there before with Liberty. We opened up, and I had one brick and mortar location, one Kmart, which was a disaster back when Kmart was around, and then two Walmart locations, which all that is just marketing. Yeah. But it turned into a ton of work. We didn't really make any money, probably lost money. I was working like crazy. And then I saw the opportunity. I'm like, all the real players in this business are area developers. And so I went to my parents. I said, hey, we should partner on an area development. I'm going to work for the corporate office. I'm learning the tax business. Let's do that. And we bought the area development rights for Austin, Texas. Okay.
And then your goal was to kind of like sell the franchises to other people rather than operate them yourselves? Was that the model?
That's exactly it. Like it was called area development back then. I think they call it area rep now, or AR. Sometimes it's called master, but yeah, we bought that region. There were 4 locations open that year. And then we went in and grew it over a 9-year period from 4 locations to 42 locations. Some of those I owned, and a lot of those were owned by franchisees. And you're right. My job was to sell franchisees there, just like a franchisor, like a mini franchisor, sell new franchisees, help the existing ones become profitable or more profitable and happy. And that's when, 9 years later, we grew it to 42 locations and had a nice little exit.
Okay. Would you like that business? Is it a good business for other people now to consider, or has the landscape changed?
So we sold, and I always think about when it's time to sell, because in the tax business, things were changing. And in that tax type of business, you're more it's a retail tax business. You're not doing business returns. You're not, you're going next to check cashers and things like that.
Advance.
So we were financing their tax loan, or we were financing their tax refunds. That was the business. And then the government got more involved with that because, there's groups that said the interest rates are too high or too many fees here. And so we saw the landscape starting to change. And the other thing we knew, based on our franchisees, we had some of our bigger, more successful franchisees that were like, hey, we're getting ready to get out of the business. And so we'd grown every year, and we knew how Liberty Tax valued these things, where as long as you're growing every year, the multiple that you get on EBITDA is higher. If you have a year that goes down, then all of a sudden you go from whatever it is, but it's discounted once you start to lose revenue. And so that's when we pulled the trigger and we sold. So we knew things that even Liberty Tax Corporate didn't know. And then just with the environment, the legislation and changes in the rules and whatnot, it was time for us to get out. And it's a very different business today than it was back then.
Cool. So what did you do next then? So you got all this money from this big exit. What did you do next?
So I was living in Austin, Texas at the time with my wife. We had our first baby, and now we have 3 daughters. So we had our first baby, and I remember my neighbor across the street had like their parents around, and they were like always like watching the kid and helping out. And I'm like, we have none of that here. And we've had 100 days of 100-degree weather. And I grew up in South Dakota where the evenings get cool. They don't cool down to like high 90s. They like get cold. And I miss that. And so we eventually moved back here. So we exited that, moved back here to where I grew up in a small town in the Black Hills in South Dakota. And then I started to look at what was next. And I started to become a franchise broker or consultant. I worked with a company called Franchoice, no longer with them because I stopped doing that a while ago, but had a great experience. And I did it back then, Brian, because I wanted to get access to deals. Like I wanted to have the inside scoop on franchisors, and that's why I got into it. And then I realized so many of my friends that were in Liberty were looking for new opportunities, and I was the go-to guy. So I made good money, worked very little because I had a supply of leads from friends. And that's when I got into another AR opportunity in a home care business. I got into Amazing Lash Studio, and then I got into Sola Salon Studios, where we eventually built out 12 of those in Orange County. Coming out of the last recession, and had a nice exit on that one. So that's kind of sums up the next 5 years post Liberty sale.
And so for each one of those, were you like operating, or did you find partners that kind of ran the boots on the ground? Like what did that look like structure wise, and like your time and attention and focus?
After I sold Liberty, I did not want to be like the main guy running these businesses anymore. And I wanted to find partners. So I'm a big fan of partnerships, and most of my partnerships have done fantastic. And I've learned some things along the way, but they were all done with partnerships. Most of those partnerships were friends from the tax business. Like we saw each other, we knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. And so we kind of combined, especially with the Sola Salon one, we combined, there's 4 of us that went into this together, and they were local. And we chose California because one of them was local. All 3 of them were local. I was the only out of state guy. And one was we all kind of divvied up responsibilities, and we decided to dominate the market. We chose California because I chose California. The reason I wanted California is because I could go there, and if I found more brands, I could open them up in California because it's such a huge market. You got LA, Riverside, San Diego, Orange County, and like our Amazing Lash was in LA County. The home care company was everything south of LA County, and then Sola was Orange County. So I wanted a large populated area. That way, if I get a part of an emerging brand or a brand that's really on fire, there's still going to be available opportunities. And so that's why we chose California.
Okay. What's interesting too about your story is, you're kind of looking where the opportunity is and not stuck in a certain place. Like you go to Virginia Beach, he tells you go to Kansas City, you do that. You go to Austin, you go back home, you find something good there. You go to LA, you find something there, or maybe not move there, but that's where the opportunities are. And I think, I don't know, a good lesson, like sometimes you're not a tree, right? You can move if your life is right for it, or you find partners who are willing to do it.
I'm a huge fan of that. I've owned in Oklahoma, Chattanooga, outside of Nashville, other markets as well, but all through partnerships.
Yeah, and that would be the key. And that's like, even for our concern of how we look to, hey, can we grow across the country? It's like, how much is my time going to be then committed to having to travel versus like people on our team versus partnerships? because it's like that's the fear, right? That I'm going to have to like fly out to wherever every single week to handle some problem because someone else can't. And I guess that's how you balance it, right? There's like partners in market. You do a good job. You build teams. I mean, there's always a solution to it. It's just figuring out what that is.
That's it. Yep. I've always had partners in the markets. If one, I shouldn't say always, most of the time I've had partners in the market. The one that I didn't, we needed to have a really good operational manager there. And it's still not the same as having a partner there. And we tried to have a partner in that one, but that one didn't work out.
What's your typical partnership deal look like? Is it a 50-50 just equity? Is it a certain split based on operator versus you? And like, what does it look like?
So there's what it used to look like and what it looks like going forward. What it used to look like, we were all equal capital and equal responsibility. So here's what it looked like at Sola. This is probably the easiest example. There were 4 of us. We were each four responsible for capital calls. We all, throughout the whole partnership, we put equal capital in. And we had the same mindset going into it, that we wanted to hire out a lot of the heavy lifting. So we spent time with the first 2 locations, opening those up, burned through some managers that just weren't high quality managers. And I know that you know what it's like to have a really high quality, like COO, district operational type person. And so we had managers, not a quality COO, quality DOO. And so we said, okay, we're working too much in this business. We all want to do other things. We need to hire somebody. And this is the frame that we had. Would we each give up $30,000 to not have to be on conference calls, to not have to manage our store managers, to not have to do all this? And everyone was like, yeah, I would give up 30 grand to do that. And so we were like, okay, our budget's 120 grand to go find somebody that is better than we are at doing this thing. And so that's what we did. And we went through probably a 3-month process finding the right person. And it was a game changer for us. We sold that business for more money because we as owners weren't involved with it. And our DOO operated everything. He did everything from dealing with a 7-figure build out, lease negotiations, contracts, managed everything. And so we were on a call with him once a week for an hour, maybe 2 hours. And then we'd have quarterly either face-to-face or Zoom meetings, but we would at least meet face-to-face a couple times a year. And that's really, I love that partnership because of the way it was structured, and the partners worked really well together, even through the sale, which can be a challenging thing because everyone has different ideas when they want to sell, how much they want to sell it for, what to negotiate on and whatnot. And we sold it to private equity, so it was even more scrutinized.
Okay. How big was that? How many locations? What was the revenue?
That was 12. That was 12 locations. It was an 8-figure sale, and 2 private equity. The same private equity group that bought out Sola Corporate bought us out.
We're buying out franchises. Back. Okay.
Yeah, and we were the only brand or the only franchisee that they bought out, but they wanted that Orange County market. We were getting pressure to open up a bunch of them, and we just didn't feel like that was the right mix that they felt was the right mix. And so it was a good transaction for everybody.
Yep. So what do you look for in a franchisor, like, or a brand, like, talk to me about, or someone is interested in franchising? There's lots of different ways you can go, right? I'm all about like the legacy, the old brands. It sounds like you're more into kind of these new brands and like first to market perhaps. So like, what do you look for in choosing?
Yeah, let's talk about that. This will be an interesting conversation because I'm probably one of the few guys out there that talk openly about the disadvantages of emerging brands. And I talk openly about that because I want the audience to be aware, because I saw somebody in the Facebook group the other day talking about getting an attorney to review an FDD, the FDD. And they said, someone mentioned like, hey, most people hire the attorney at the last minute when they're pregnant with buying this business, when it should be reviewed kind of from more of a logical and open-minded place versus like, I'm going to buy this no matter what. So too many people get too caught up in what they think the business is going to be versus what it actually is. And so let's talk about emerging brands. Let me back up. Sola, this is my favorite. Sola was a brand that had a ton of open territory, lots of open territory, but was not emergent. I think they had probably 50 locations open up. They'd been open up for years. The founders had, I think, 8 to 12 full P&Ls in their item 19, full P&Ls. and their franchisees were friends. Franchisees were expanding. Their franchisees were very open with their numbers. And to them, they're like, this is just, it is what it is. And for us, we're thinking, wow, they're super transparent with stuff. So these were franchise people that weren't really experienced franchisors. They were just
business owners, helping duplicate a
building
model.
A great brand.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So that one we considered an emerging brand, but it had so much data to look at and so much validation. When I say validation, you just don't think about 20 franchisees with 50 to 70 locations. They'd been open up 3, 5, 7 years. And that makes a difference. So that's my frame of reference. Like, that's my favorite thing to find, is a brand that has not exploded. They've spent time building the system, building the processes, and seeing how franchisees can be more successful, and franchisees are successful. And then they kind of get introduced to the world through the broker network, or maybe they catch fire some other way. But anyway, that's my favorite. But going back to emerging brands, most emerging brands talk like they can, talk like a big established brand. They use things like, we've sold X amount of territories, we have X amount of franchisees, we have, all these other metrics that they use as success, versus things like, we've had, our franchisees continue to expand. Our franchisees who've been around for 5 years are buying more, they're building more, and you can go back and look at historical closures of franchisees that have closed. They've been open up for 2 or 3 or 5 years, and you can see how many of those are closing. Versus an emerging brand, there's no closures, and they'll brag about no closures. But why are there no closures? There's different reasons why there are no closures. And sometimes the franchisees might just be okay bleeding money for 3 years, and then it's time to close the door. So I'm a huge fan of emerging brands, but there's a big but. That's just riskier. It's like you and I know. Yep. Investing. We talk about investing. There's that risk reward. So with emerging brands, there's absolutely risk. And I think people discount the risk because they're so excited about the team that it is. And man, I have emerging brands that I have equity in. I'm an advisor to emerging brands. So I've got brands that I love. They're emerging, but they're still not proven. And I don't let myself forget that. I think one of the reasons why is because I used to think as a broker that I was really good at picking out emerging brands, because heck, I picked out one that had, an 8-figure exit. It was great. So I thought I was so good at it until I wasn't. And I'm like, oh, I missed it here. And I missed it a couple times. And I was quickly humbled and realized I wasn't as good as I thought. And then if you ever around open people that are open with that, that's a common thing out there.
So you had a couple others besides the ones you mentioned that you opened up and failed or closed?
Yeah, there were some that I had to close. I lost 6 figures, well into 6 figures on.
Yep.
And I like to, talk about that, because that's
so what did it look like? I mean, tell us as much as you can. Like what was the business model? Was it time, attention? Like why didn't it work?
It was a brand that got, there's a couple different ones. And so I'll just kind of merge things together.
Okay. Yeah.
Brand that did really well in the broker networks, meaning they sold a lot of franchises. Solo did the same thing, had massive success. Young brand, are considered emerging, sold a bunch, had a lot of success. Other brands have not had a lot of success. And I'll kind of merge brands that I know about versus the one and some that I have actual experience in as well. So some of the things that are to watch out for, some of the dangers that I've seen in emerging brands that haven't done very well post explosive growth. They didn't have franchising experience. They had executive experience, but not franchising experience. They had really amazing corporate store sales, net profit, et cetera, but they didn't have proven average franchisee data. They didn't have the either the financial wherewithal or the experience to go and help a bunch of franchisees open up. And so that really, those cracks don't really get exposed for a couple of years. So here's the thing, just because something sold a lot, the franchisees don't really experience the failure for a couple of years, and they're still hoping that it's going to work. And so that's the danger. And so for me, I've had in my history leases that I've had to get out of. You pay money to get out of leases because there's personal guarantees on these things. And then there's loans that you have to eat. You go out of pocket. And that's why some people, if they don't have deeper pockets, they go bankrupt. And that's why it's important for people to pick brands that won't bankrupt them, even, if it doesn't work out. So I was always a big fan of, that's why you go with lower cost things, service-based things versus brick and mortar, or like Solo would have been a disaster if we were on the hook for millions of dollars, many millions of dollars, if things didn't work out. But things worked out. But I didn't put enough weight on that decision because I didn't fully understand having 12 personal guarantees on leases that were $10,000 to $20,000 a month, and having 10 of those with 5-year personal guarantees on each of them. Yep.
Yeah. And then the other part of it, sometimes these franchise disclosure documents, you'll agree to guarantee royalties for so many years, like the life of the contract. So if it's a 20-year franchise, you're 3 years into it, you are potentially on the hook for 17 years, let's say, of the average franchise fee that you're paying to them. So even if you close up, they could sue you and personally sue you for the balance of the contract if you can't sell it. We had a similar experience to you with that, and another brand that we wanted to get out of. We weren't profitable, and we couldn't just close it because we were getting threatened to be sued for the balance that was $600,000 or whatever it would have been. And so
and that's what new people don't understand when they're validating with people like you when you're trying to get out of this brand.
And so what we've learned is now we negotiate that if any new franchise agreement we sign, a lot of it is negotiable, that, if we leave for any reason, and as long as we're not in default, and we don't owe them money, that clause is null and void. And so a lot of those things you can negotiate, but you gotta, you don't know unless you know. And so that's why it's.
Yeah. And that's a good one. And you don't want cross defaults. You try to get rid of cross defaults. One location defaults. You don't want it to default your whole entity or other locations that you own. That's another one that is a kind of an important one that you don't really think about it until it's an issue. And then just to hit on that one with royalty, just call it everything's escalated right away. You have to pay everything. I've seen that as teeth to force or help franchisees make the right decision and not just, shut the doors or do something malicious. And I've seen it once or twice where franchisor threaten that, and they actually use that. But most of the time it's just teeth in the contract to help bad franchisees make a better decision for the whole franchise group. But like I said, that's what I've seen most of the time. But there have been a couple of times I've seen franchisors actually use that.
Yep. Cool. So let's pivot into, so you're making money in all these different ways. And then how do you go about investing it? So once you make your money, how do you make some decisions on where you're going to put the money to earn, passive income?
It's easy as a business owner, entrepreneur, to start to make some really good money and then start to spend money, or just reinvest it into expansion or second brand or third brand, versus starting to invest it in passive type things. Because most of us entrepreneurs get into business thinking, I want to go from the whole cash flow quadrant with Rich Dad Poor Dad. I want to go from employee to self-employed to business owner to investor. And a lot of business owners are actually self-employed. They don't realize they're self-employed. And a lot of business owners don't realize, they think they're investors, but they are actually business owners. So I met a friend, Justin Donald, and he's the guy that I'm like, man, he is in that investor quadrant, and it is absolutely crystal clear to me. And so we just struck up a friendship randomly in Austin at a mutual friend's house one time that I was there. And then we became friends. We became a part of a group. I became a part of a group that he was a part of already, called Front Row Dads. And then we just got to know each other more. there. And that's when I really started to understand who he was and what he knew and how he invested and how he looked at the world. And so we just struck up a friendship. I got into his world, and then we ended up starting a mastermind together for passive investing, cash flow investing, and saving a bunch of money on taxes and things like that. So I got introduced to him, and I realized my investing game was not what I thought it was. I was in apartment syndications, hotel syndications, and I'd done well in that. But it's hard for people not to do well in apartment syndications the last 10 years. Like you have to be pretty bad to lose money in apartment syndications. So anyway, he opened up my eyes to seeing things like debt equity deals, getting into a deal, making a 13% interest on a promissory note. You get paid back in 2 years, and then you still have equity in that company. And that's a de-risked equity deal because you get all your capital back. You've been able to get paid interest monthly on it, and now you have equity in this company. And then you do it again and again. And in 5 years, in 10 years, you're in 5 different equity deals, and some of those are going to hit and some of them are going to go to zero. But I didn't even understand that in the beginning. I didn't even understand some of the tax saving strategies or mitigation strategies that my eyes have been opened up to. So that's a little bit on my view of the passive investing world.
Okay. So do you have a target mix you're looking for, or a favorite type, or kind of how do you view the whole pie of, I assume you make probably most of your own investment decisions and you probably don't have like an advisor, or maybe the advisor's the mastermind. I don't know. Talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you go about making these decisions?
Justin's a wonderful advisor for me, but more as a friend. He and then in the group, he gives a lot of advice. So like if people need advice, we're in that group giving advice. I give it, but we also have Justin who, as much as I know about franchising, he knows about passive investing. So there's advice given there. There's introductions given there to different professionals that can be trusted. And here's the thing with like this mastermind. Let me back up even more. I also have an advisor that does things for me. His name's Jim Do with Do Wealth. I don't know if you know who that is. Yeah. So I work with Do Wealth, and they have advisory, but they also do things to shield my time. And so that's been a fantastic thing. So I work with them, but then this mastermind is really where Justin and I, we get access to more people, more experts, more advisors, because we have this larger group now. But in there, the people that come in, they're given advice. Justin and I don't make any money off of it. If people invest into different deals, we don't get any back end carry, any back end fees or anything like that. So it's a group that is designed that people can join it and they get true, honest advice, and they don't have to wonder, why is Erik, why is Justin saying this great thing about this deal and the risk is this and the it's mitigated here. It's advice that they can take to the bank because it's not tainted.
Yep. Yeah. So you've got a couple different masterminds. You're part of this passive income mastermind. You have your own franchise related masterminds, correct? So talk to me about like why masterminding, like why do you run them? Talk about the power of it for those who don't know.
So I've got 3 masterminds: the Tribe of Investors with Justin, the Franchise Tribe, which is for franchisees, and the other one's for franchisors called Fran Dev Mentor, who really focus on franchise development. So why masterminds? It was about probably 5-6 years ago. I went with a friend to a conference called Traffic and Conversion Summit, and Ryan Dice and Perry Belcher and Roland Frazier and Richard Lender run that thing. And it's this big marketing conference. And one of my friends in franchising was a member there. So they had a little breakout and they're like, hey, you should check this thing out. So I go there and I go to the little kind of like informational thing, and I left a member. Like I think I dropped either $20,000 or $30,000. I'm like, I wanted to level up my game. Like I've been, as a broker, as one of the top brokers in the country. I'm the guy that everyone's listening to in the peer groups. I'm like, this is great. It's great for like an ego stroke, but I don't care about ego. I care about learning, and I enjoy being the dumbest guy in the room. Like I'm comfortable doing that. And so I felt uncomfortable in that room. I'm like, there's people that are achieving much more success than I am. They know marketing like I don't know, digital marketing and whatnot. So I joined that group, and I quickly, after a couple of years, felt very comfortable in that group. They're my peers now. And then I thought, I need to level up again. And I had some friends that were joining another mastermind called 100M. And I thought, man, this would probably be a good one because I'm very comfortable where I am again. And that was $100,000 to join that one. And I'm like, that was a lot.
That's a big one. That's a good ticket.
That was a lot of money for me too.
Yeah.
Like $100,000 to join this thing.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's certainly going to make me uncomfortable and feel like the least qualified person.
And you got like skin in the game. Like you better act, you better go to the meetings, you better make networking, you better take action. Otherwise it's like, what the hell? Why are you even doing it? Right.
The intentionality was off the charts for me because I go there. We did Beverly Hills. The first meeting was in Beverly Hills. So Dan Fleshman, Joel Marion ran that thing, and they had like 20 advisors in there. Like Marcus Lemonis was there, and just different people. And there was 100 of us. It was capped at 100. So I remember going to that first night. It was this massive mansion, and it was movie star there speaking, and we had to get up and introduce ourselves. And I was so nervous getting up there to introduce myself. The spotlight was on you, and you had to tell like who you are, what all of that. And then the next morning, I was in the gym, and I heard some people talking, and they're like, "Man, were you nervous getting that mic and talking in front of everybody?" And they're like, "I was." And I'm like, man, other people feel the same way. So anyway, I thought I was the only guy that felt uncomfortable in that room, but there was a lot of other people that felt that way too. And as a matter of fact, one of my friends, Travis Chappelle, he runs a podcast thing, and he just posted about it just a couple of days ago, how he said, I had no business being there. And I thought he was an amazing guy. So there's a bunch of us in that room, and it made me realize no matter what room you're in, how successful people are still people, and there's going to have some level of I don't belong or imposter syndrome. So I was definitely that there. And then, I mean, let's just fast forward a couple years after that. I was that part of that for actually 2 years because COVID hit. They extended it a year. I've made some really good friends there. Dan Fleshman, he's was on my podcast. He's the youngest founder of a publicly traded company. He's the one that puts that thing on. Dan knows everybody. I got a call from him about 6 months ago. He's like, "Hey, Erik, I've got this brand. We're thinking about franchising it. It's called Bocce Bus. And it's like a food cart thing." He's like, "You should talk to DJ Heart Attack about it." So I get on the phone with DJ Heart Attack. I have no idea who he was. My kids were just laughing at his name. And he's like, "Hey, I'd love you to, help us out with the brand. We're probably going to be franchising it." So I called Dan. I'm like, "Hey, Dan, I like it. It's interesting. Snoop Dogg is a big fan of it." So Dan's like, "Snoop Dogg's posting this all over Instagram, and he's like giving us unbelievable press just for free because he's a fan." And so Dan's like, "Hey, I want you part of this, Erik. My other equity partners in this, I don't want to take equity away from them because we've already done the deal, but I'll give you a good chunk of my equity." So Dan just gave me some of his equity and in that brand. And I said, "What do you want for it?" He said, I want to be able to have access to your connections and your brain. Like when I need your brain on franchising and I need your connections, that's what I want. He didn't want my time. He didn't want, all this other stuff. And I said, done. And so he gave me equity that was immediately worth more than I paid for that mastermind.
Yep. That was gonna be my question. What was your ROI on that $100,000 or whatever?
I think the equity, if I can't remember, I knew it at the time. I think it was like around anywhere between 200 to 300K.
Okay. And is that still in business, that franchise?
Oh yeah. It's not a franchise yet. They raised money. They have a couple that they're starting up in Florida. They already have them in California. They're going to prove out that model and then franchise it. So 100%. And
then you could have cash flow for a decade, right? Off this deal and your equity position for probably, I don't even know how many hours of work, but probably not significant.
Hardly any hours of work. Yeah.
Yep. So that's like the power, right? And then that leads probably to another deal, right? And then that leads to another deal. And like, you never know where it goes, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And so, and I never, I never tried to get Dan's attention. I was always just adding value. Dan's such a great guy. He would come on to my podcast. He came into the mastermind a couple of times just to give. He's just that kind of guy. I was never trying to get access to him. We were walking one time and we got into an elevator and somebody was like, "Hey, can I get a picture with you?" And I'm like, "How often does that happen?" He's like, "All the time." Yeah. And so, people are fanning out. And I just developed a friendship without trying to get into any deals with him, and it just organically happened.
What company is it that he runs?
It's called Bocce Bus.
Okay. But you said he was the youngest CEO of a publicly traded company. Is that it?
He was. No. Dan had an energy drink.
Okay.
Yeah, he had an energy drink, and then now he has a company called Elevator Studios. And Joey Carson's the CEO of that, or the COO of that. And they're the ones that put the Kardashians on the map. He's talking
Gotcha.
to me like,
okay. It's all that stuff. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like the power of being in a group. I mean, I'm in GoBundance, and it's the same thing where you just make these friendships and you never know what it leads. And so that's like, so it's cool. You're doing it in a couple different worlds. I'm sure they start to kind of commingle and people probably upgrade from kind of one to the other.
I started that out of COVID. I started a Facebook group called Franchise Secrets, and I had it. And I brought people in like Alex Hormozy. I do know who Alex Hormozy is. Yep. I brought in Alex and Bedros Keuilian and Dan Fleshman and Kevin Harrington and people like that, because everyone was ready to give when COVID first started happening. Yep. And so they would come into the group and just give. And I thought, I'm spending so much of my time interviewing these people. I'm like, I went to the group and said, "Hey, who would want to pay to be a part of a group where I continue to do this?" And there was about 50 or 80 people that raised their hands. And that's when the mastermind started. And then there's people within that first mastermind that said, "I want more, Erik. I want access to high quality people." And so that's when I developed a second level of that group. And then it's just continued to grow. And it's been a lot of fun. And when you're doing something like that, you bring in speakers. Now you have a platform. So like we have a podcast, you and I have a podcast. Yep. But we also have now I have a platform as a mastermind. So I'll bring in Kevin Harrington or bring in Dan or somebody like that. And now I have their cell phone number. I can text them and they see me as the expert. And so it's just the relational capital has been off the charts as well by having that mastermind, running that mastermind.
That's cool. Awesome. So kind of near the end here, where can people connect and learn more about you if they're interested in joining any of these masterminds or finding out more information? What's the best source? Scalablefranchise.com, scalablefranchise.com. That's my newer website. Got a podcast called Franchise Secrets. I got a free Facebook group called Franchise Secrets, but go to franchisesecretsgroup.com, franchisesecretsgroup.com. This is probably the best thing for anybody in franchising. Just get in there. Like I kick out people that try to pitch stuff, a broker or brand or somebody trying to pitch stuff. They just get their post denied. So it's a really helpful group. You can post anonymously in there if you're going through different struggles, and it's a positive group. I don't want franchise bashing or franchisor bashing. It is just a really helpful group. So for the audience, like that's probably something that they want to be a part of. Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and the kind of amazing growth that you've been on. And, it's kind of exciting to watch you continue to kind of grow as you expand your network and relationships and all these masterminds. So Brian, cool, man. It's been fun, man. Thanks for the time. Awesome. I'll see you. That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Beers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.